Contra Costa Transportation Planning Committee meeting for September 5th, Wednesday, September 5th, 2018. I have looked down the panel and we are all here. Now is the time for public comment. Members of the public are invited to address the committee regarding any item that is not on the listed agenda. If you do want to speak, I see a couple of faces I don't know. Please place cards and hand it to a staff member, and I see no one moving, so we're going to move on to the next item, which is item C, the approval of the minutes for the planning.
Move approval.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. A little off the agenda, but I think everybody will forgive me for taking this. Martin, would you do the next item?
Yes, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our new administrative assistant for the planning section. Wilma Van Hook is here, and this is, I think, her 4th week. She's going to be staffing the planning section and staffing these committee meetings.
We're easy.
Yeah.
Some of us are. Anyhow, thank you. Welcome. It is nice to meet you. Thank you. All right.
That was a shot.
What?
Nothing, never mind.
Didn't say who. Please, do we have any items that we wish to pull from the consent calendar?
Consent 1 to 3.
You move for the consent. Second, I've got a Hudson and an Hudson
And what's
approval and an Abelson second.
Got Grovick's name.
Was it you?
No, it wasn't.
Stop it. This is recorded. So that being the case, I offer the chance for if there's any public comment, and I'm seeing nobody moving. So may I have a vote? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, got through that part. All right, now we're on to the regular item meeting items, and item 4. Is there any formal presentation from the staff?
Yes, Madam Chair. Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning at CCTA. And we're tonight asking for you to recommend authorization to the authority for us to enter into contracts with 2 qualified consulting firms who will prepare 4 community-based transportation plans. We issued a request for qualifications over the summer, and through that process, 2 qualified firms applied, Nelson Nygaard and PlaceWorks. And both of these firms are qualified to perform the studies. There are actually 4 studies that need to be done. There's one in Richmond, there's one in Concord on Monument Boulevard, there's one in Martinez, and there's one at Pittsburgh Bay Point. And because there are 4 studies, 4 separate studies, we thought it'd be good to split this into 2 consulting teams. Our original budget for this was $215,000 in surface transportation funds from MTC. We have managed through working with MTC to double that number to $430,000. So we have about $100,000 available per study, plus a little bit of contingency. So we think we're on track to get these studies completed. It probably will take 18 months to 24 months to get the studies completed. We haven't developed the details, schedules yet, but we're heartened to see that we have enough money to do all 4, because you may recall when we discussed it earlier, the previous studies cost $60,000 each, and the estimate now is $100,000 each. And there's also an amplification of the public outreach portion of these. MTC is asking us to do very extensive public outreach in the communities of concern as we develop these studies. So with that, I'll ask for your recommendation to the authority to approve these 2 agreements with these 2 consultants.
Second.
Okay.
I believe 5 minutes.
What we did you get the Mitchoff is the mover and Hudson? And you're the you are picking on me tonight. Okay, so is there, and I love you back. Is there any public comment on this item at all? Seeing none, we're moving on to our vote. Is all those in favor say aye? Oh, you were waiting for instructions. Oh, how amazing. I know.
Yeah, but we don't.
No, you don't. Thank you very much. All right, we're on to this next item. Sorry, we're having more fun than we ought to. And there would be a staff report, Brad, is there not?
Yes, there will be. Yes, I'm Brad Beck. I'm Senior Transportation Planner at the Authority. In July, the Authority approved the countywide bicycle and pedestrian plan. It is now both on the Authority's website and on keepcontracostamoving.net. So if anyone wants to download it, they'll be able to do that. It looks pretty good, if I do say so myself. One big part of the update to the plan was to update the implementation measures in it. There were 30 different actions. A number of them are things that the Authority staff already does, staffing the Countywide Bike Ped Advisory Committee, working with jurisdictions to help on their plans to fund different projects. There are 6 of them that will require some more substantial effort and probably be led by the Authority itself. And they're all of the implementations or actions and how we plan to implement them are included in Attachment A. But I want to point out 3 that the staff is suggesting has the highest priority. The first is something that came up and was raised during the public review draft of the plan, and that's to conduct a pedestrian needs assessment. We know quite a bit about where bicycle facilities are and a bit on where people use them, but we don't know quite as much about where people walk and what needs they have. So we're proposing to do this assessment to try to understand exactly where facilities are needed, where they are, where they aren't, where best to put them, and to provide best practices on how to maintain a good pedestrian network within Contra Costa. The second action is to develop a Vision Zero and systematic safety approach for Contra Costa. There's a Vision Zero is something that started in Sweden, and they've done a very good job at reducing the number of serious injuries or fatalities within that country using a number of approaches. And we've got a little sidebar in the staff report on the fundamental principles for Vision Zero commitment. So we're not exactly sure what the Authority's role would be, but the idea would be to work with jurisdictions to figure out what their concerns are, how the Authority can help in a Vision Zero effort within Contra Costa. That will actually both of those 2 efforts will likely involve some consultant support, and we'll deal with how much it is and as part of the mid-year budget. The third one that we are suggesting doing right away is helping to develop a coordinated approach to bike share within Contra Costa. There are a number of bike share programs that have been started, and they have had, in some cases, unintended consequences on adjoining jurisdictions, and jurisdictions who have instituted them have gotten comments from residents about where are all these bikes coming from and why are they parked on my sidewalk. So one staff person discussing the issue said that the Authority could help coordinate the chaos. So the idea would be to have a forum with local staff to get staff who's had experience, like in Walnut Creek and El Cerrito, where they have Lime Bike programs, to discuss how they approach it and how other jurisdictions throughout the state and the nation, how they coordinate and control the unintended impacts of these bike share systems. And there are other issues involving non-compete between Berkeley and El Cerrito, where there aren't supposed to be any Lime bikes except BART stations. So there are a number of issues that need to be addressed, and we would provide some forum to work out some ways of addressing those impacts in Contra Costa. And those are the three things. There are some other ones that we want to do later, but those are the three things that we want to get your recommendation on tonight.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah.
But
Did you want to?
let Dave,
Okay,
okay. Please, Jen, oh, sure.
ladies first.
I was just commenting on what was just said,
That's the end of it, too.
and I just wanted to mention that it's not so simple as a county issue, because El Cerrito, for example, happens to be next to Albany, which happens to be in another county, and we both have a Lime bike. And my neighbor who lives, his house is partly in one city and partly in other, this is to make this funny, but it's true, went to rent a bike in one city and ended up being pointed towards a bike in another city. So I think they are, I don't think there's any problem with that I've heard of anyway. It's certainly working that way.
Well, for Lime Bike, it's to take them as an example. Their system doesn't really care
Right,
where
and
the
we don't
bikes
either.
are. The city of Berkeley, however, does have Ford Go Bike as well as Oakland, and there's a non-compete agreement in the city. So Lime Bike, Berkeley is not supposed to allow any other bike share systems within the city, and though apparently the people can take a Lime Bike from Albany or El Cerrito and ride it to a BART station where they can
Right.
park it, but nowhere else in the city. San Francisco is in a similar situation. We've heard a lot from staff there is quite incensed by Lime Bike and other bike share systems that aren't supposed to be in San Francisco, but the bikes, of course, end up there. And it's just the same as when they instituted in Shadelands. A week later, you were finding Lime Bikes along Monument and Concord and Pleasant Hill.
If I can, Janet, you just hit the point I was going to make.
Oh, okay.
If you could kill that thing in a minute. When we, this time Karen and I, started the pilot program with the Air District, I mean, we couldn't find anybody to do this thing or keep it going for a year. It was, but I believe Peter was there. When we went back to that Mobility Summit in Chicago, there must be 15 different companies now that have this. Ford is the one in the city. San Francisco's, it hit from day one. But the reality is some of us that are on the border are going to run into exactly what Janet's talking about. My suggestion is somehow, some way, as we get involved with this, that we try and short circuit where the problem might be, either by bringing in the other CMA or MTC directly, because they took over our pilot program and it went from 1,000 bikes to 7,000. So I'm not sure what the heck they're doing, but we had it all the way down to below Santa Clara. No, not to Santa Clara. What's the one where the Niners? Wherever the 49ers are, below that one. Redwood City, I think, also. And, it wasn't as busy, but it only takes one that's commuting to leave a bike there, and you've got problems. So it sounds like we're going to work on some kind of an ordinance or something, like the early stages of solar or wherever where we're headed for this. And I would say, especially when you have Julie and Amy here, at least find out who they think should be looking at this also, because they became very territorial about bikes when they took over. One suggestion.
Thank you. Kevin?
Although I'm not really affected with bike problems right now in East County because everyone's on Highway 4 trying to get to work as opposed to riding bicycles around. I still like the three priorities you've selected, especially pedestrians. I do a lot of walking in Oakley on the weekends with a dog, and I can tell you there's more people walking the streets of Oakley than there are people riding bikes out there. And we still have lots, especially in East County, there's still lots of further east you get, the more rural it becomes, and connecting sidewalks and communities via sidewalks and creating safe pedestrian passages through all the communities out there, I think is a top priority we need to really look at out there. And we had a serious accident with a pedestrian this afternoon in Oakley, so I'm also with Vision Zero. Once again, good choice of selection on those priorities.
Unless Karen has anything to say, I'm going to say I've noticed in Walnut Creek that Line Bike is being more responsible, and they are picking up the bikes way faster. I think they got overwhelmed when they started, and they're doing a better job. But it is clear that this is going to get more and more complex, not unlike what we're going to have to deal with, I think, with ride sharing and car sharing, which is people pick up and drop cars wherever. So I think it's all part of the program. And since Walnut Creek had a couple of issues, very short order, where we lost 2 of our citizens in tragic car accidents, it's really, really exciting to think that, well, granted, we can't stop accidents, but we can mitigate how dangerous they are. So thank you. Those are extraordinarily good choices. And gosh, I love pedestrians too. All right, there have been some more people. Is there anybody here who has any public comment? And I know Janet has one more thing to say. Let me get the public comment, and then you're on. I see none. Janet, please.
Okay, there is one other component that I've been noticing, and I've seen it in the newspaper, and that is there's not just bikes and pedestrians, there's also scooters, electric bikes. There are various things, and the main thing I've noticed about the other 2 things is that they have a tendency to cause accidents. They go very fast. There have been articles, I think, I don't know, it was certainly within the last week, about speed limits that were put on them by either Oakland or San Francisco, I don't remember which. So I think there's even more to it than those 2 modes. There's also these other variations, and that it would be, I would think it'd be a good idea to include those in this, what you're talking about.
Yeah, I did mention, the plan does include scooters and electric assist bikes in the discussion of the implementing
Okay.
the bike share and coordinating the chaos. I didn't mention it in my presentation, but
Okay, thank you.
All right. I see we've dealt with all we need to do before there is a vote. So,
Move approval. Second.
all right, we have Kevin, who is going to approve, and second from Trouble Next Door. Yeah.
Taylor?
Thank you. May I please have a vote? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. All right, so it's unanimous. And now we move on to item number 6. Staff, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Peter Engel. I'm the Director of Programs for the Transportation Authority. John and I were going to tag team this project. This presentation. I'm going to kick it off. I'm a little under the weather, and I want you to feel sorry for a moment when my voice starts to squeak. So I'm just going to let him primarily go through it, and I'll save my voice for jumping in with my opinion and answering questions. So just to kick this off, in July, we brought you a resolution to authorize the executive director to sign a grant agreement with Caltrans. The grant was for preparing an accessible transportation strategic plan. At the time, we said that in September we would come back with more details on that, and this is that presentation. The term accessible transportation is not one that's typically used in the industry, so John will give a little bit of a definition on that and to what we mean when we talk about accessible transportation. And then there's basically 4 things we're looking for authorization from the board this month, and then we'll go over those in more detail. So I'll let John start the presentation.
Thank you, Peter. Again, my name is John Cunningham. I'm a planner in the Contra Costa County Department of Conservation and Development.
And this isn't working, wait. No, I'll hit, or you can hit the
that
button.
work?
There you go.
There we go. As Peter mentioned, the term accessible transportation isn't really in common usage. Yeah, got it. Thank you. Yeah, as Peter mentioned, the term accessible transportation, it's not a commonly used or industry term. We're using this term with this effort to describe the universe of services, programs, and administrative structures related to serving seniors and persons with disabilities. So now, what are those specific programs? I'll go through briefly the list that we're including in that list of definitions. The first is the Americans with Disabilities Act paratransit. This is the paratransit I think we're all used to. All the public transit operators are obligated to provide this service in parallel with their fixed route service. The second category are senior transportation programs. These are often programs provided by cities to seniors. There doesn't have to be a disability to be on these programs. There's often an age limit. The different cities have different requirements. El Cerrito, San Pablo, Richmond, and other cities run these types of programs in their cities. And then we have program-specific transportation. These are programs run by specific nonprofits typically. You have adult day health care, nutrition programs that specifically operate transportation for their clients and for their programs. And so they're very individual agency based. Then we also have in this accessible transportation umbrella our other support services, and these are mobility management services, travel training, volunteer programs, those sorts of kind of, again, just supporting services. And also in this definition of accessible transportation are the different administrative or institutional arrangements that can be used to provide services to this population. There are mobility management centers, there's transportation or paratransit brokerages, which is a system of arranging services. And there's also a mechanism called the Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, which is a mechanism defined in California state statutes that has a number of advantages and tools at its disposal. Okay, keep going, or?
So
Okay.
I'll try it for a little bit here. So there's been two recent plans that the authority has brought before the board many times that have mentioned this study. First of all, Measure X, when we were going out for the sales tax measure, and the idea of the study was first introduced there to help provide a mechanism for allocation of the funding that would be in that particular category. When that didn't pass, the idea of the accessible transportation study was brought up again in the 2017 Countywide Comprehensive Transportation Plan. Here on the slide, you can see both areas that I'm talking about where as the board felt that it was important to go ahead and move forward with this study so that we had it in place at some point when additional funding did become available.
So,
It's the same.
should I go back? Okay. So Peter provided the policy basis on why we're moving ahead. So backing up a little bit from there, like, okay, what is the underlying reason for that policy basis? The biggest impetus for us moving ahead on this is something that I know has been discussed here before, and that is the demographic inevitability of the aging population. And the graph that you see before you is just one of many I know that I've seen, just illustrating the fact that the growth of the older population. It's referred to as the aging tsunami, the silver tsunami. Basically, the population served by these types of programs are growing. And so that's That's, we do have the policy basis as Peter described, but this is the driving factor. There are a number of other kind of compounding factors in addition to the demographics. I'm just going to mention one, and that is the fact that providing this type of service, paratransit or demand response, the cost to provide this service is increasing quite a bit faster than fixed route or other conventional types of transit. So it's something we want to get out in front of. Jump into it. Okay, we're going to get a little bit into the specifics now and what exactly are we going to be doing with this effort. I'm going to give kind of three main tasks. The first is to review the existing individual operations. At the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that there's a universe of services. We're going to look at the universe of services. We're going to analyze city programs, ADA paratransit operations, program-specific operations, county operations, and make recommendations to improve service, cost effectiveness, coordination with other programs, and establish consistent metrics among the operations to the extent possible. With this step, there's going to be long and short-term recommendations. Now, the second main task is we're going to review the potential for a more coordinated countywide program. There are numerous models with potential for countywide implementation. With each model, there is some centralization and some coordination of functions, some minor, some major. I mentioned a mechanism earlier, the Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. That's a very formal designation established by the state, and we're going to be looking at that mechanism with this effort as well. And then the third step is somewhat self-explanatory, and that is we're going to develop and present a phased implementation plan. As we're going to get into in a minute, implementation with these types of studies and these types of programs can be challenging, and so that's why we have this as a very deliberate step in this process. Wait, keep going?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this particular segment of the transportation system is known for being resistant to change. This is the case nationwide and in Contra Costa County. It's the unintended consequence of having very siloed funding and very siloed programs. It's the nature of the beast. Complications are so prevalent in this sector that there really seems to be an entire industry built around providing analysis on why studies have implementation problems. You just see just a handful of the studies that are out there on your screen. So Contra Costa is not immune from these challenges. We have completed our own studies, one in 1990, one in 2004, and one in 2013. So we have some experience with this. So we've reviewed our own studies, the recommendations in those studies, reviewed the analysis and studies we saw in the previous slides that we mentioned, and we've tried to develop a deliberate process to address the factors which typically compromise progress in this field. But we're gonna get into that in a minute.
I want to point out on the slide the amazing graphics and the change over the years that have taken place for the coverage of these. That first one on the left almost looks like Tennessee rather than Contra Costa County. But I did want to point out that one of the tasks in this study will be to look at these previous plans and consider their recommendations and maybe why and why not certain recommendations were either implemented or not.
So the research and barriers that we mentioned previously in other areas is we're responding to that in the design and the process of our own study. So we need to be deliberate in this process because CCTA and the county, really we have no direct authority to implement changes. This process needs to be collaborative and cooperative if we're going to ensure success. And so it's again, we'll get into the steps right now. The first barrier that we've seen and has been identified in study after study is that due to the funding and regulatory environment, authority and responsibility in this field is diffused across different agencies, across different industries, and even across different geographies. In addition, this topic is overlapping number of issues, social service issues, public health, civil rights, public transit. They all come together in this sector to create an interesting mix. Even our own 2013 study, which you saw in an earlier slide, identified this situation. They described it as the lack of a structural platform being a major impediment to action. So this diffused authority, what are we doing to address this with this process that we haven't done in the previous studies? The first explicit thing that we're doing is we're asking all participating entities to sign on to an MOU, establishing commitment to the process and agreeing to take formal action on the final recommendations of the study, whatever their decision is and whatever the recommendations are. It's required as a part of the grant. We included that step when we submitted to Caltrans. One other way we're approaching this study is to address the diffused responsibility and authority is having the county and CCTA collaborate on this. In presenting a unified front and commitment, we were hoping it will represent a critical mass of leadership and help to get all the parties moving in one direction. One other approach that we're using that I don't believe was done quite to this extent in the previous studies, at least the two that I was participated in, is CCTA and the county have worked and collaborated with two different mobility management groups that have been meeting in the county. They met largely during the lead up to Measure X and also during the countywide transportation plan. And so we worked with those folks fairly closely. The activity on those meetings has subsided a little bit after Measure X and the CTP, but we're continuing to stay engaged. And then additionally, both CCTA and county staff have met individually with each transit district, checking in with them with their comfort level on CCTA and the county participating on the study. And everyone that we've met with so far, they're comfortable with this approach. The meeting with AC Transit, we're setting that up right now, and we'll be reporting on the outcome of that meeting as well. And then one of the other barriers that are often referred to is, it might be pointing out the obvious, but the recommendations need to be funded. Money, we need money. There is often an assumption that because what we're doing is essentially restructuring or reforming existing funded programs, that no additional funding or staffing resources are necessary. That's not the case. One analysis that we reviewed in the lead up to this plan suggests that advocating for coordination in the absence of additional resources is believing in magic. And then one other study we looked at describes advocating for coordination in the absence of funding is a way to avoid talking about solutions that are too painful. And so, the solution to this is, of course, funding, but in the ATS plan, we'll have the typical chapter, how to fund the recommendations, but staff is not relying on that. We're proactively seeking mechanisms to fund the study. We're not waiting for the study to start. When we're ready to publicly discuss those options, we'll be rolling them out. But the need for funding on this is not lost on us, and we're taking a proactive approach. And that concludes our presentation. I think Peter mentioned the actions that we're requesting tonight. They're in your packet and they're on the screen in front of you. Approval of the scope of work, authorization to release the RFP. There's an oversight committee structure on there. We'd like comments or approval of that structure. And then we would like to release the draft MOU that I mentioned out for review to partners of the study.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Do we have any panel questions or comments? Excuse me.
I'm trying to be a good girl.
I'm waving at you, yes.
Thank
And you, Karen, please start.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank both Peter and John. This has been a long time coming, and then we have I consider myself a water warrior, so I was thinking we have our senior warriors, and I don't mean they're old warriors. I mean they're warriors, advocates for seniors, of which we all are, except for a few people. Matt, John, Terry Ann, Wilma. Anyway, I'm thrilled that you were able to obtain the grant. That's fabulous. I just want to be clear, you're seeking our approval tonight as a planning committee. This will go to the full authority in 2 weeks, and that's when you'll release the draft. I thought that was the case, but I just want to be clear for the record. So I know we have some people here. I don't know if they plan on speaking under public comment, but I'm happy to move the item to get it going, and then.
Could we have comments first?
No.
Yes, please, please,
Okay.
please. I'm going to try and do this officially. Commissioner Abelson.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What concerns me about this one is that I come from the part of the county that actually has a transit system that's multi-county. So when I look at what's the right organizational level, I don't think of it as the county. I think of it as a larger area. And so limiting it to a county, as I've said actually probably in those other studies, is to me not the right unit of measure. And were we to actually do something that like this, then what that does is say we have to divide it literally where on my house is literally on that line, both sides. I can see that, in fact, this is not going to work at all for an area like the area where I happen to live in western Contra Costa County. So I want to bring that up because that, to me, is what the problem here is this thinking about it as a county issue. It's not, to me, a county issue. Then there's a second issue, which is combining private and public entities at such a large scale is another thing that concerns me. When I was just at a meeting earlier this week of the Service Review Advisory Committee, which is the paratransit arm for both BART and AC in the AC Transit service area, and they were complaining about their funding situation and so forth. So anyway, I just wanted to bring up that in my area, this would not be the right mechanism at all to settle the issues that relate to our area. Anyway.
I don't disagree with that, but we have to start somewhere. And Alameda County has their own transportation plan, and, I'd like us to be the leader, and they can come along. I heard you say you're going to be talking with AC Transit. I know they operate in Contra Costa County, but we do have a member, they're an ex officio member, so I don't want us to be held up because it would only be one county. I think maybe, and I know that there are models other places in California, so we wouldn't be the leader, but perhaps we'd be the leader in the Bay Area. And perhaps the study will be looking at some of the barriers, as you said, for funding, and those, I'll call them interjurisdictional issues, and may have some recommendations on that. But I don't want to see us hold this up for lack of other counties. I mean, we're bordered by water on two sides. I would think perhaps South County might have some concerns, the same as you're mentioning for West County. So I still am supportive of this and believe that we need to move forward, get some answers, see what we can do, and then bring other, at least Alameda County on to be partners as we move forward. It's taken us a while to get to this point. It's going to take us a little bit more time to continue on, but I would hope that we could address those kind of issues.
Commissioner Abelson, are you going to respond any more? Turned off your mic.
Well, the only, I don't know, could you address the public-private part of it? Or maybe you don't want to, you don't have to.
No, it's not that. The public demands that their tax dollars be utilized in the most efficient manner. And when we talk about private sector, those are mostly nonprofits. I know Supervisor Anderson and I have put money in to a program that is being utilized now. I don't know if we would I'm not sure I'd call that private, but I don't see a problem in looking at everybody. Decisions will be made down the line. This is just a study. It will give us some information so that we can further direct where we want those dollars to go. No, we're not going to make a gift of public funds, but I think we need to look at what is out there, and what Mr. Cunningham said, we don't have a real solid feel, and how we might be able to work together. So again, this is just a study, going to bring us back information. Those decisions can be made further down the line.
Commissioner Hudson, please.
Yeah, actually, the three of us on the board, Karen, we are part of a transit authority that does have a public-private partnership. Bishop Ranch contributes hundreds of thousands of dollars. We do go into Alameda County. We'd be crazy not to consider it, but the reality is that you got to start somewhere, and if in fact Alameda feels, you want to call up LAFTA and see how they feel about it. I mean, I'm fine if they want to kick in some money too. It wouldn't be the first time. We did it with the priorities for Measure J. I think we got started with put up the billboards that now are on your phone, but a reality is this hits us perfectly. I definitely want to pursue the public-private partnership because of what I'm seeing with the other organizations, the Chariot, the Ride and Share, and all the other. I mean, we go back, was it a Vigo? I can't remember the names of these companies anymore. First we couldn't find them, then they had 50 of them. But the reality is this is the direction we're going. And public-private partnership is the answer. Once you start and find out you've got some money to identify you need more money, then it's easier to get the help if you're successful. So, yeah, I'm not doing this as a battle of yeses and nos. I think this is just a smart way to get going now. Or we can wait a couple of years and three other people will show us how to do it.
All right. I have some feelings about this, but I think they were very well covered by other speakers. So it is now time for public comment, and is there a speaker card for somebody else that isn't? If not, let me start with Elaine Welch. Would you come forward and...
I was going to do that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here representing Mobility Matters. We are doing incredible things with mobility management right now, but on such a small scale. My biggest disappointment in my career in this county was Measure X failing and us not being able to come right back with something, because without adequate human and financial resources, as was stated today, we cannot move forward. My fervent belief is that this study is the one we're finally going to implement. I have great faith in these two gentlemen and the people they work with. They work with us. We are that private sector out there. We are the ones who are working with the public sector. I can't give you more than 1,000% that Mobility Matters will be behind this. We'll roll up our sleeves. We'll sign MOUs. We'll be cheerleaders. We'll be the ones that really work with you on this. We're doing a lot of very exciting things, and I'm so tired of doing it on a little minuscule scale. There's so much we can do, and I just want to thank you for considering this and these two gentlemen for all the hard work that went into this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Debbie Toth, would you please come forward?
Long time no see. Good evening, Chair Haskell and members, commissioners. I'm Debbie Toth with Choice in Aging. We're a nonprofit organization serving all of Contra Costa and now Solano and Napa counties, helping people age in their communities rather than in institutions. And we do it through a variety of ways. But I have been a transportation advocate here in Contra Costa County for 16 years. And this is the first time that I see movement truly happening with accessible transportation. I appreciate the definition at the beginning of this presentation as accessible, because some people have mobility barriers, some people have cognitive barriers, some people have physical barriers. Some people have a mix. Some people have developmental disabilities. There's a whole different range of abilities that folks have. And so there's a whole different range of what is considered to be accessible. So that's super important to recognize that piece of it. I want to thank the county and I want to thank the Transportation Authority for their leadership and for having these two gentlemen championing this, because they are both incredibly hardworking, well-respected human beings who can be, I shouldn't be saying this maybe in front of his boss, contacted at 9 o'clock at night for an answer to a question. It's it's pretty impressive. So I'm extremely pleased with this, and I will say, as a member of the Expenditure Plan Advisory Committee for Measure X, which sadly failed, as Elaine mentioned, on that Expenditure Plan Advisory Committee, the entire group was asked to rank what things were more important to fund. And the only one area that got 100% yes, we need to fund this more, is the accessible transportation slot. I want to say that I've been hearing for, almost the full 16 years that I've been here, Debbie, your participants are spending 3 hours waiting for a bus or 3 hours on a bus to go 7 miles because it's an unfunded mandate. Well, there's plenty of other unfunded mandates out there that find money, right? I mean, we completely redid all of our environmental practices. They found money somewhere, right? You're the policymakers. We got to make it happen. I appreciate that you reached out and found this money. You reached out and found this money, whoever you reached out and found this money. And we're going to have to do a lot more of that because, as you saw with that projection, just in Contra Costa County, from 2010 to 2060, the population that's 85 and older is going to grow by 299%, and East County is going to have a lot of that. And so we need to be upfront in funding this, because it's not right that you should have to age out of your ability to get to the grocery store or to church or to the mosque or wherever it is that you go. Finally, I want to say that we do study the heck out of everything. We study bikes, we study PEDs, we study Caldecott tunnels, we study BART tracks, we study all kinds of stuff. We don't study accessible transportation needs, and it's time that we do, and I super appreciate this, and I'm very supportive of it and super grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Mary.
My name is Mary Bruns, and I operate the La Miranda Spirit Senior Transportation Program, and I chair the Senior Mobility Action Council. So I'm simply here to support this effort, to thank Peter and John for all the work that they have done, and to encourage us all to go forward with supporting funding for all these different types of accessible transportation needs. Each city that has a little program like the La Miranda Spirit serves one city or a couple of cities, and there's a greater need. There's also the need for between county transportation, particularly for medical appointments. So my goal is to support efforts that move us in the direction of more accessible transportation for all the needs that Debbie mentioned, but my particular interest is seniors. Thank you.
Mary, wait, before you go, my La Miranda Spirit, different name, different city, goes into Alameda County. Does yours?
We serve Lafayette, Orinda, Moraga seniors, and we take them into central Contra Costa County, Walnut Creek, Pleasant Hill, Concord, Martinez.
You don't go through Caldecott?
No, we're too small. I'm operating with 10 volunteers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure that wasn't a criticism. It's that points out the need.
No, from my point of view, I'm glad for all the public input. I would just love to have you all in East County with me when we go for our next measure to impress upon, because that's where Measure X lost. We need that type of convincing to come to East County and tell them that there's more to it, because that was the biggest question I always got from East County residents, is no one could see what was in it for them. Yep. And even though we talked about all these programs and options we were doing, and I just told them we just spent $1 billion on Highway 4, Oh, okay. What have you done me lately, like yesterday? So I was really, need help out there.
Commissioner, I guarantee you, they will be there. We just need to give them dates and times, and they will be there.
Yes, we do. All right, we have a motion and a second, and unless there is any other discussion, I'm now calling the vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? I didn't hear one. And one abstain? Yes, okay. So Commissioner Abelson has abstained. All right, next item.
Madam Chair, this is my item as well. I'll just take care of that from here if you don't mind. A little bittersweet item here. Bitter because we're coming asking to allocate more funds to a study that we are in the middle of. Sweet because I think we need more money because of issues that are being found as the study is going on with regard to the complexity of the 511 Contra Costa program and how it's currently operating. So the original contract was $100,000. We used Measure J, Program 17, which is a commute alternative funds. The consultant is requesting to augment their budget by $36,178.63. They've done some work in figuring out what they need. The reason for this is, well, first of all, I will admit I was a little concerned about the $100,000 up front. Because I knew some of the complexities of the program. In doing this, in studying the individual programs that are provided by the 3 separate offices, there was a lot more databases that are kept and don't coordinate with each other. There's multiple programs, and the analysis of those databases and programs has just taken more time and used more resources than anticipated. So there's detail in the item regarding what the consultant feels they need to finish the project appropriately and the additional time that they're going to need. We do have funds that have not been allocated, some Program 17 funds, so those are available for us to use for this. And we look for your approval from the board to add these funds and keep the project moving.
Okay, wait a minute before you say anything. As an accountant, I just go absolutely bonkers on $36,178.63. Would it be possible for us to consider $36,200 as
38. Actually, the request is for 38.
Oh, okay, not to exclude. Okay.
Yeah.
That,
I know what you mean.
Oh, Lord, really, you cannot get there in reality. So,
Well, and my question is, that's only $1,200 less, and this is such important work. You're welcome to come back, and if it exceeds that,
Yeah.
but should we give a more realistic number? I'm just wondering, let's throw in 50, and you won't spend it unless they bill for it, and then we're done. But,
okay, I would have just said 40, but
okay, well, 40, I saw that, but that's really only 3,000.
I know.
Okay, you want them to come back, 38, or pardon me, 40.
Yeah. Oh, these are fun. So I really hate to pass up any of them, but yes, I am comfortable with 40 as my first time out moving the indicator. All right.
Second chair.
Whatever. Is there any other comment besides that on this?
I have if I can, I have a comment, and I'll move for 40. I don't have a problem with that. I just saw that it's alternative. What silo you're getting this out of? Alternative J. Has anybody asked for what TFCA funds?
Yeah, we can't use TFCA funds for doing a study like this.
Yeah.
So we're using our measure. So it's the 1% that goes into community alternative programs.
Okay. So what we're saying is, I'm hearing from everybody else. I'd say let's send it to the board. It's 40,000, and that's virtually a 10% increase. But I mean, if that's okay, a little more. But I would move that we do the staff recommendation and change the 38 to 40.
Commissioner Mitchoff has seconded it, and so we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on this or any other comments from the panel? I see none. I see that we need to have a vote, and that would be all those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. We have a unanimous vote. It was a little scraggly there, but we got it.
1,000 out of the travel fund.
Okay. We're now up to any other business. Is there any other business that anybody would like to bring before us? Any reports, anything else? All right. That being the case, I now move us to the adjournment to the next meeting, which is Wednesday, October 3rd at 6 p.m.